Hey, welcome to Q&A, where you ask your questions and I do my best to give a theological answer. You can ask your questions on slido.com, use the hashtag ALC22, and I'll do my best to answer it. I answer questions on Sunday and Wednesday. If your question hasn't been answered, it could be that I've already answered a question similar to that. If you have a look in the playlist Q&A, go back, you'll probably find it. Or else it means that I just haven't come to it yet. So don't give up. Well, tonight's question is a good question. It's a very topical question. The question is, what are your thoughts on the league players who refused to wear the Pride jersey? Where is the line between freedom of religion and contractual obligations? Now, if you're not into sport or you don't follow legacy media, this question may be, what are they talking about? Earlier this week, Manly Sea Eagles made a decision to replace the white stripe with a gay pride stripe, and as a consequence, 7 players stood themselves down because it offended against their cultural and religious values. So before I get into it, I just want to acknowledge that this is a 2-part question. The second part deserves a greater depth than I can give it tonight. So I'm going to come back to it. That's the question, where is the line between freedom of religion and contractual obligations? I really think that it's worthy of some thoughtful response because it is a good question, a good follow-up question. So I'm going to answer that later on in the week. I'm just going to stick to this first part tonight. So here we go. Like you, I'm going to say that I think it was badly handled. Everybody agrees it was badly handled. No consultation, no nothing. And the fact that that didn't happen, I think, highlights the underlying issue. You see, the players who responded when the news was announced, they have never hidden their religious beliefs, their cultural beliefs. Some of their player profiles, certainly their social media accounts, all reflect their religious belief and their conservative cultural beliefs when it comes to sexuality. They've never shied away from it. They've never been aggressive in what I've seen or heard from others in the way that they have outlined their belief. But when they've been asked, they've said, well, this is what I believe and this is why. They've been respectful of other people's positions. But my point is this. It's always been out there in the public arena. And the fact that they have people in sports clubs whose focus is player welfare, they would have been aware of their conservative religious and cultural beliefs. And so they would have been aware that this decision would have gone against that and caused there to be some reaction. So the fact that it was done without consultation suggests that they knew that, and they, in their naivety, thought they could somehow get away with it. Obviously they didn't. There was that pushback. It became very public, and finally the team management had to step in and defend they didn't so much defend their decision, but they apologized. But even in the way they apologized, it again highlighted the fact that they weren't really everything that they said that they were trying to be, that this really wasn't a genuine desire to be inclusive. It was actually a decision that was driven by the woke agenda, if I could describe it like that. Because when they apologized to the LGBTQ community for putting them in that position of having to defend themselves, of feeling that there are people against them and stirring up anti-feelings and all those sorts of things. They never once defended the players and said, hey, we're really sorry we put you in this position. We're really sorry that you had to defend yourself publicly, that we were late coming to your defense. You should never have had to defend yourself. You should never have been in this position. It was our responsibility to sort out. We put you in it. We're sorry. None of that. And yet, in the context of apologizing and their public statements, they said that this was never about pride. The stripe was never solely about pride. It was about saying we want everyone, note that, everyone in the game, and we want to make them feel that they can get involved because they are included. Think about that for a moment. If that was a genuine desire, then why did they not talk with the players who are already there? the players they knew would be affected by this? Why did they not apologize to them? Because this really wasn't about inclusiveness. It was about virtue signaling to a very small minority, but a very vocal minority, in a woke society, in a way that is trying to say, hey, we're for you, without any thought to the impact on anybody else. If they were genuinely concerned about trying to right wrongs, about trying to repair relationships, about creating pathways to include all people, irrespective of sexuality or religious belief or cultural background, then they wouldn't have done what they did in a way that they knew was going to offend against other minorities. They would have said, you know what, we've got some minorities. How can we include others? And they would have had discussions around meaningful pathways for that to take place. The fact that none of that took place, they just announced there was a stripe, and then when people said, hey, we feel excluded now, and the attitude was, well, I'm sorry, tough. You either wear it or you don't play. Says that it was nothing more than an ideologically, politically driven agenda, that they're not really concerned about inclusiveness at all. If it seems like I'm being very judgmental and very harsh, it's probably because I am leaning that way a little, because we're seeing this more in society. There was no attempt to try and find a compromise. There was no attempt to try and have a dialogue and say, well, okay, we recognize your values and we recognize there are other groups of values who do not mesh with yours. How can we find a compromise? Maybe what if we let you wear that your normal stripe, and we had this other stripe for others to show that we genuinely are inclusive? There was no attempt at that. And I think that reflects society at the moment. There's no attempt in society to try and find middle ground, to compromise. Everything is polarized, where it's you either believe like us and you are with us, or you are against us. There's no concept that, hey, I can disagree with you, but that doesn't make me your enemy. I can disagree with you, doesn't mean I hate you. I can disagree with you, it doesn't mean I dislike you. We can still be friends. But society has polarized to the point where now acceptance is agreement. In other words, if you are going to accept me, you must agree with me, and that's a worrying trend. That's certainly not a gospel trend. The nature of the gospel is to go into the worlds of those who are different, and to find what relational ways of connecting despite the difference, in order to begin to be light in the dark, to point beyond what is to what could be, to reframe life and worldviews in order to point them beyond the limitations of self, to hope. A hope in the one who created all things and is before all things, and in whom all things are held together. And so I think we're going to see more of this type of thing. And for us, I think the issue is, how do we respond? How do we act as a counter to this, of this divisive thing where it's about playing to the audience, it's playing to a woke crowd, so to speak? How do we engage with people? How do we seek to build places where people can disagree and the world doesn't end, where people can have meaningful discussions about difference and not feel excluded? I think that if we're going to make change, if we're going to make a difference, that's how we need to begin to think, and we need to shift our thinking in order to counter this divisiveness that you're either for or against in that context. Because otherwise we're never going to have meaningful discussions. We're not going to be able to build meaningful relationships. We're not going to be able to go forward. We're just going to part and end up warring one another. And that's never going to advance the gospel agenda or build a decent society. So there's much more I could say. I could go on, but I won't. I'm aware of the time. So those are my thoughts on it. I'll answer that second part during the week. I think it's a great follow-up question, and I look forward to having that time with you. But until then, God bless.